Hello and welcome to Vergecast, the flagship podcast of BBL Drizzy. That one track needs a podcast. We're going to talk about it for an hour this week and then an hour next week, minute by minute.
It's actually fun because then we get to spend the whole episode debating whether BBL Drizzy can be our theme song legally now that we've said that. And it's perfect.
We're going to do a lot of fair use on the show today.
Yes.
It's coming. Hi, I'm your friend Nilay. David Pierce is here.
Hello.
Alex Kranz is on a break. But for our first segment, Charlie Harding from Switched on Pop is joining us. Hey, Charlie.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
We have a lot of AI, music, copyright to talk about. There's some lawsuits. As always, Drake is involved. It just seems to be the way of the world. There's a bunch of new phone events coming that just got announced we should talk about. There are new party speakers from Ultimate Ears. That's very important to me. And we got a lightning round. We got a full show before the 4th of July. This is America's technology podcast. But before we begin, I have to issue a correction. There are some words that I only read and I never say out loud.
Ooh, which one?
There are lots of those words, tons of them. Uh-huh. I was a small nerdy child in the middle of Wisconsin who read a lot of books that the other children in Wisconsin were not interested in discussing. Just a whole universe of vocabulary words.
What is like your main one from when you were a kid that you were like 26 and all of this? I feel like Chameleon is like the classic of the genre, right? Where like half the people in the world grew up thinking it was Chameleon. For me, it was learning that Hermione's name is Hermione and not Hermione, as I called her for however many books I read before I saw the movies. Did you guys have these that you grew up with? And discovered way late.
I still don't know whether it's Dearth or Darth, and I don't want to find out.
Fair enough. Don't email us about it. Don't ruin this for Nilay.
I don't know if it means a lot or not enough.
On Switched on Pop, we have an ongoing uncertainty about whether it is homage or homage.
That's good.
And we have been written many emails that it's both. And so we've refused to use the word from now on out.
Niche and niche, very confusing.
Both acceptable.
Also have been told it's both. So there's a lot of these.
Yeah.
One of them in recent times is RISC-V, which is, I would say, not a thing that comes up in casual conversation for anyone. Even the people who are working on RISC-V probably aren't just walking around the office saying RISC-V. I said it was RISC-V the other day, all right? I'm sorry. I mean, this is your correction. You got one on me. I apologize. I don't know what kind of Slashdot nerds are reading it out loud. I mean, you're my people and you're listening and you know, like, we have a bond here. You're listening to a podcast in which the word is said out loud and you, the audience, know that I've mispronounced. There's something special there. Precious. I want to protect it. I'm just saying... We are the only people who know.
How do you know they're right and that you aren't now
also a good question, Charlie. Am I being gaslit by an internet conspiracy?
I would also like to posit that with all Roman numerals, the letter and the number are both correct. Like when the iPhone 10 came out and it was the iPhone X, it was the iPhone X. I don't care what anyone said. I got a lot of crap for that, and it was the iPhone X because it was the iPhone and then the letter X. You call it whatever you want. I submit that both should be allowed at all times.
So I support this in theory. It's Super Bowl XL.
Unless it's more than one letter, then
but Super Bowl XL, like they were like hyped for it, right?
Yeah, they did a thing.
That's your moment. But I was one of those Slashdot nerds who was like, it's Mac OS 10. So I'm sorry, like even
though it's not, it's OS X.
we got to move on. Anyway, that's your correction. I'm just telling you what we share as a group is special, and I'm sorry that I pushed the boundary of it. But I'm also saying no one says these words out loud. It's just not a thing that happens, and I feel nothing.
Charlie XCX has entered the chat.
What is XCX in numbers?
It isn't a real one.
Isn't C in Roman numeral?
C is 100, so that would be 100. It would be 90 and then 10 more.
I don't think Latin allows you to put them in this order.
Yeah, that's just Charlie C, I think.
I don't know how Roman numerals work. Speaking of things that are bad at math, AI. It's true.
That's good.
It's good. Big week in the AI landscape. a weird week for me emotionally. I'll explain why in a second. The major labels have sued 2 AI companies that you may or may not have heard of, Udio and Suno. These are classic Silicon Valley names. We should all be proud. They're music companies. They're AI music companies. Udio is the company whose tool was used to make BBL Drizzy. We'll have Charlie explain that entire chain of events. And then Suno has a deal with Microsoft. It's in Copilot, and you can ask it to generate music in Copilot. How would you train an AI tool to make music, you might ask, as did the lawyers at the Recording Industry Association of America. And the answer is you just put a bunch of music in them and you train the model on a bunch of music, including what appears to be a remarkable amount of the recording industry's music, not just music that's out in the world. The companies are sued. There's a lawsuit. The RIAA is mad. The RIAA is already mad. They say that they asked the companies what was used to train the models. The companies, Suno, deflected and said their training data was confidential business information. Fine. Udio made the same statements, and then Suno also said, our stuff is transformative and designed to generate completely new outputs, not memorize and regurgitate pre-existing content. We'll get to that in a second, because that is actually a very funny claim based on what you can do. The RIAA put tracks in lawsuit, which we will listen to. It straightforwardly can just make Johnny Be Good in a song called Prancing Queen, which is
my favorite.
Deeply hilarious. Yes. There's just a part of this where these companies knew that what they were doing was training on copyrighted work, and they kind of assumed that they would get away with it, or at least be able to like pay the money and move on.
Can I ask a very possibly dumb framing question about this? Because we're going to get into the weeds of like a very specific music case. But a lot of what you just described, the sort of basic outlines of like how these companies trained their data and what they're being accused of doing and who's mad, feels identical to me to every other conversation we've had about these AI models, right? Like it seems to me that if you change Johnny Be Good and Suno to the New York Times and ChatGPT, we're functionally talking about the same thing. So like, I want to get deep into this in weird ways, but like, is there something different about the fact that we're doing this with music than the way we've been doing this with like the web for the last year or so? Yes. And it's that the music industry is organized and aggressive when it comes to protecting its rights. So the difference is lawyers. The difference is lawyers. And also the history of music and the internet is lawyers. Like the reason I'm so conflicted about this is that I went and became a copyright lawyer because Napster came out when I was in college, and I was radicalized because I thought everyone was stupid, which is what should happen when software comes out when you're in college.
Yeah.
I'm assuming there are some kids out there today who are radicalized by the presence of new software. But it wasn't for me. It was Napster. I went off and became a copyright attorney. I sucked at it. I don't ever want anyone to think I was good at this. As a practicing attorney, I was garbage. But the thing I did was I worked at a law firm that defended other college kids who got sued for using Kazaa against the RIAA. And the RIAA was suing college kids and actually suing the universities to get the IP address of the college kids on their networks who were using the tools, and then identifying the college students and then suing the college students.
It was my roommate's computer. It wasn't me.
Yep.
I swear.
This is like a lot, right? That's a lot. That's just a lot to like the universities are caving and not protecting their students. All this stuff is happening. And they were running this program at break even. They just wanted $5,000 settlement so everyone would be scared and stop doing it. And they won. That worked. Sort of. Now we're back to it, right? But like the movie industry is not quite as good at stopping the piracy as the music industry was. And they ran that program to kind of like shut it down and chill Napster and Grokster and Kazaa and all the other ones. They ran Grokster all the way up to the Supreme Court. That decision is 20 years old now, the RIAA versus Grokster. Great. Then they did the iTunes store. And they got deals with Steve Jobs and then other music stores. And then they did Spotify and Apple Music and streaming. And all along the way, they have been extraordinarily litigious and extraordinarily protective of their copyrights because people have an emotional connection to music that they can trade on. This is true in a way that even Hollywood doesn't. Like when Disney's like, we must protect the copyright to the Avengers, people are like, go fuck yourself. Like, right, in a way that the music industry, when it's like, you're stealing music, you are making it so artists don't get paid. There's an emotional resonance that argument tends to have. Charlie, I'm curious how you see that changing over time, but they've been good at it and they've run the playbook over and over and over again. Music is also a closed ecosystem of like 4 big companies. And so you see things like interpolation, where an artist uses a bit of a song from another artist and fans get mad, and then writing credits get distributed and money flows inside of a closed ecosystem. None of that is true about the web. None of that is true about the media. So if you are a writer at a media company, nothing. Like no one cares. Like there's not some big apparatus designed to make it seem like your work is emotionally resonant and should be protected in the way that the music industry does. So I think that's a huge difference here. The other difference, and this is where I really I'm very curious for your take here, is that the outputs of these systems are just the songs, right? And the lawsuits are about training, right? All copyright is dumb. Like it's a dumb legal system because it just regulates copies. And so they're like, you made a copy to do this thing and you didn't have the permission to do the thing with the copy that you made. So copyright infringement. Weird. All computers do is make copies. We've talked about this so many times in the show. So they're not talking about the outputs, but I think the outputs are so convincing. Like in order to get to the thing can just make Johnny be good, it is obvious that you made a copy of Johnny be good. Charlie, what do you think, man?
I feel like the music industry is the one place that copyright becomes part of public conversation in a very frequent way. People talk about when Pharrell is borrowing from Marvin Gaye. People talk about when Stairway to Heaven might have been copied by another song. People constantly are debating in social media, hey, you kind of sound like you borrowed this other person's thing. They should get a credit on it. There's no thing in journalism where someone's like, hey, Nilay kind of used someone else's text. Maybe we should give David some extra credit on that piece that Nilay plagiarized. I'm sorry, I'm obviously not accusing you of
I do that all the time.
This is hypothetical.
I don't think you understand.
Nilay does that all the time.
I have God mode Google Docs access, and I just lift everybody's copy left and right.
There's just no other creative industry where there's this like a level of actual infringement that happens, that then there is this internal litigious system where these major players are constantly trading credits back and forth, and the public is in on it, often debating whether or not the artist that they stan is making original work. This is part of popular discourse, and it happens in music. So it's really different when the music industry is going after AI than if the New York Times is, because I've just never been in a circumstance where I'm talking about that article was completely lifted from this other article, but we constantly talk about, is so-and-so writing their own songs?
Right. I'll give you a dumb example from movies. The movie The Dark Knight is basically an interpolation of the movie Heat, except with Batman.
Yeah.
Right? Like many of the shots are the same. Christopher Nolan is out there being like, Heat is the greatest cops and robbers movie ever made. Like, I just wanted to make Heat, but with Batman. And then you like watch both movies. You're like, oh shit, like dude just made Heat with Batman.
Yep.
And that's great. And I think everyone's like, this is the best. Like, this is so cool. And then you get to, I don't know, Miley Cyrus is writing Flowers, which the lyrics just reference
Bruno Mars.
And people are like, should she have to pay Bruno Mars? It's like, why? Like, why? Like the melodies aren't like she's just saying some of the same words.
Yeah.
Right. But the expectation is that there should be some economic exchange of value.
Well, and I would think then that the existence of that exchange of value is also how you get to something like this, right? Where it's not just everybody sort of yelling and then nothing ever happens. It's that we actually have a system by which this gets solved, right? Where we have people get songwriting credits and then they get paid for it. And there's like the music industry has built ways for all of this to work. And like you said, is very good at picking fights with those who do not play inside of that system. And so like now I'm just thinking, okay, the difference between the music industry and the others who are fighting against OpenAI and others, like just groups of authors or whatever, is not only does the music industry have a system by which it understands how everybody is supposed to get paid that has existed for a long time and everybody kind of sort of understands, but also is able to marshal that whole system against anyone who wants to exist outside of that. And part of what we've been saying forever is like all the money is on the side of the AI companies. Like who is going to be able to run a lawsuit against Google all the way to the end? And there probably aren't that many creative industries other than the music industry that might be able to do it.
They've done it before.
Yeah.
And they have one major concessions.
Right.
We wouldn't have Content ID if not for music labels going after YouTube.
Right.
And the music labels have gone after YouTube, right? Universal,
Yes.
This is where Drake gets involved. There's fake Drake that we've talked about endlessly on the show. Shout out to Laser Bong, a song that has been just aggressively censored from every major platform. Boy, does TikTok not want electronic music about bongs on its platform.
Sue about that, record labels.
You want to talk about government censorship.
Yeah.
All right? The Chinese government is like, no bongs for American teens. Just saying it. The piece of that puzzle that's super interesting to me is Universal was mad about fake Drake. They went to Spotify, Apple. They said, don't have this song. And Spotify and Apple control the catalogs in their music service. They can pull it down. YouTube is open access. Right? So anyone can upload anything. And then there is Content ID, and they have these other copyright management systems on YouTube. But it's not the same catalog control where you can just delete the song the way that Spotify and Apple Music could just delete the song. So they had to come up with some other system. And YouTube did give the concessions, right? They put out a list of like AI principles that they would work on about safety, about this other stuff. And a lot of it was, we're going to work directly with Universal and the rest of the music industry to figure out what tools are valuable and what tools aren't. And even to allow some creators to like do some of this AI music generation because we think it's cool. And then we'll figure out how to pay them. This is implicit. If you're like co-announcing that tool with Universal Music is going to get paid.
Yes.
Like the heat death of the universe could occur, and Lucian Grange, the CEO of Universal Music, would get paid. Like, he's good at it.
Yes.
These two companies did not do that. There's a quote from one of the VCs in Suno, a Rolling Stone profile from March. And he just says to Rolling Stone, if we had deals with the labels when the company got started, I probably wouldn't have invested in it. I think they needed to make this product without the constraints.
Wild thing to say out loud.
Incredible thing to say out loud.
He said the quiet thing out loud because behind all of this, they haven't ever really quite publicly admitted that they are using copyrighted works. They've talked around that in every way they possibly can without denying it. And this is sort of like the big, this is the smoking gun.
Right. And then the other smoking gun, and this is the part we should just listen to some of this music, is the output of the models themselves, which is, I mean, let's listen to it and we can talk about it. David, take us through it.
Okay, I have brought some sound. Thank you to Andrew and Liam for getting all of this together. We have 3 examples, and I will just roll through all 3. Stop me when you have feelings about this. The first thing we'll do is this is just titled "Real Chuck Berry" in Riverside. So let's just listen to this first.
By the way, and this is all fair use. No copyright infringement intended. All right, YouTube. All right, go ahead.
But he could play a guitar just like a ringing a bell. Go, go.
Sure.
Go, Johnny, go, go. Go, Johnny, go, go. Go.
All right, that's enough. Stop it
Great
before
song.
the robot censors arrive.
Great song.
I can
We love it.
confirm
All right,
that
really
is
loved it.
If you don't know that song, 1, go watch Back to the Future. Incredible movie that you should just watch. And 2, like, stop. Go get cultured. I don't know what you're doing.
Johnny Be Good, Chuck Berry,
Yeah. It's
founder
a
of rock
classic.
and roll, one of them.
Yeah. And now we have a song from Udio, which is not called Johnny Be Good, but just listen.
But he can play a guitar just like a ringing a bell. Go, go. Go, Johnny, go, go. Go, Johnny, go, go. Go, Johnny, go, go. Go, Johnny, go.
So, I mean, it's
So that one is non-copyright infringement just on its face.
Yeah. You can't.
You can't,
Nobody owns it.
You can't copyright the AI work.
yeah. Okay, so that's one. Next, we have a
Wait,
James
can we
Brown.
just? I just want to ask Charlie a hard question. Charlie's a professor of music at NYU, I believe, right?
Yes.
All right, professor. Let's say you didn't have Johnny Be Good in the training data, but
Yes.
then you had the entire architecture of rock and roll that is built on Johnny
a
Be
good
Good.
question. Yeah.
Could you back your way into Johnny Be Good?
Monkeys and typewriters and Shakespeare, right? Like
Yeah,
that's is
yeah.
that the
Right,
theory
but like
here?
you don't need. Do you need the seed crystal when you have the whole diamond mine of rock and roll?
It's a really good question because, if you look at this era of music where R&B rock and roll are sort of like rockabilly are all kind of one entity. The music is drawing on 12-bar blues, a very standard song structure. They're often in the same keys that play well on guitar. They're using a lot of the same kind of guitar licks. They're mostly using pentatonic scales. They're using a lot of the same language. And you might think, yeah, you could just sort of back into that. But the precise rhythms, the exact words, let's be clear, the copy is worse. It does not sound nearly as good as the real Johnny B. Good. You could never get to that same place without having heard that Johnny B. Good. I feel confident. And if these two songs, one being a real song and the other being nobody owns the copyright and it's made by an AI, if there were a copyright case made against the copy, it would definitively lose. I have many of these cases, many of these music copyright cases are not clear. They're often fought over 8 notes, sometimes 6 notes, sometimes a general feel in the case of Blurred Lines and Got to Give It Up. This is a direct copy of the rhythm and the words and most of the melody. So no, you had to have heard this song in order to make Johnny B. Good twice.
By the way, if you want more on 8 notes and how complicated it is, Charlie and I did an entire episode of Decoder pulling that apart. We'll link that in the show notes somewhere. But let's move on. Let's listen to the next one.
It's very good. All right, next up we have James Brown. First, real James Brown.
Wow, I feel good. I knew that I wouldn't. I feel good. I knew that I wouldn't.
I mean, the classic, an all-timer.
Another one where if you're listening to the Vergecast and you've never heard this song, like, I don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Go listen to Switch Song Pod.
Exactly.
You need it very badly in your
Go
life.
to school and then come on home.
And now we have AI James Brown.
Wow, I feel good. I knew that I would not.
That's spicy.
I feel good. I knew that I would not. So good.
Okay, so this one I actually think is very fun because it is it's like a little tiny bit further away from it in the way that the first one just is Johnny B. Good, but worse. This one is like one tiny tick further away from being just the thing.
This is a lounge band with pretension where everyone's like, just play it the way that, can you stop it? All right. Like, we get it. You thought you had something. I have one question about this, and it actually felt the same way about Johnny B. Good. The way these models work, right, is you ingest a bunch of data into them, they set a bunch of model weights, and then they like statistically make the next bit, right? They're just sort of like assembling the thing around the prompt, which means they're kind of just assembling ones and zeros to make a sound wave here, which is pretty wild if you think about it. Like, that makes sense with words, right? What is statistically the next word in the sentence around this prompt? When you get to like, what are the ones and zeros of a sound file? And you get to statistically hear the next ones and zeros. That's pretty weird. It's actually a pretty weird way to make an audio recording. And the thing that strikes me about this one in particular, but the other one a little bit, the instruments don't sound real at all to me. Those horns sound so fake. Not like synthesizer fake.
No.
But almost exactly like what you would expect if you asked a computer to statistically produce a horn section. Like, it's almost, play it again. You're like, just listen to it. It's so weird.
Wow, I feel good. I knew that I would not. I feel
Do you hear how like weird and thin it is?
I knew that I would not. So good. So good.
It doesn't sound like an ensemble of horns. It sounds
Right.
like this weird synthesized thing where the beginning of the sound and the end of the sound is exactly lined up. The sound is there's this artifacting quality to it. This is like the Pope's jacket version of sound.
Yes.
Where it's like, you got it close, but all the lines are wrong. Why does he have 7 fingers?
Right. It's a statistical approximation of a hand, right?
Yeah.
But as expressed as a horn section, which is really weird to like just on its face. And you can, people are like, it'll get better and blah, blah, blah. But like you can hear a meaningful difference once you know what you're listening for. And it's like, oh, this is a fake instrument. It's not a fake instrument the way a synthesizer is a fake instrument.
Right.
It's just fake. Like it doesn't make any sense.
over the top of all of it right now, and I don't know if this is a solvable problem, I imagine it probably is that everything sounds kind of grainy. There's like this top level hiss kind of over the entire recording of any AI output. It sounds maybe equivalent to Nilay, those files that you were not downloading in college. The really low bitrate MP3s when MP3s were actually noticeably worse.
Yeah.
That's what these sound like. All of them have this artificial sheen on top that sound very lo-fi.
Yeah.
In addition to artificial instruments.
Just a side note, I can't listen to the song In Between Days by The Cure without mentally inserting the weird compression artifacts at the high end, because I listened to a shit MP3 of that song so many times that the cymbals are just forever distorted in my brain.
There's literally a plugin and guitar pedal called Lossy that is made to recreate the sound of early 2000s MP3s.
That's very good.
So if you need it, I can run it
It's
for
just
Lossy.
the
through
elder
Lossy for you.
millennial button,
All right,
basically.
so wait,
Exactly what it is.
Yeah.
so that's the sound.
Yeah.
Talk about the actual music here. Is this right? With Johnny B. Good, you're like, that's straight copyright infringement. This is weird, right? It's like slant
Yeah.
rhyme. What do you think?
I think that it's the exact same rhythms. I'd have to look at the notes. I think they're quite close. They're the exact. If they're maybe they're in a different key, but they're like the same intervals moving in the same direction at the exact same time. That would almost certainly lose in court. If these were we should be clear. The AI companies are not being sued for the output.
Yep.
But these outputs, if you were to try to make a case, I'm sure a judge would rule in favor of the James Brown estate because it is the same line. Well, it's more or less the same line. It's an interpolation of the line. There's slightly different words, but it's the same rhythms, same melody. That almost always is going to, that's always going to win.
And here the output is proof of the input.
Right.
They're not suing for the output, but
That's right.
the output seems unusually important here in that respect. That it's like if Udio is doing the thing that it claimed to be doing, which is transforming stuff into other stuff. We have a very different kind of fair use case, but reading through the RIAA's lawsuit, like the thing they did over and over and over was just go reproduce songs that exist in the world.
Yep.
And that's how we're fighting about training it.
Yeah,
like I
yeah.
went through and pulled a bunch of the prompts that they use to get songs.
We did
and
the
they're
same thing.
They're so funny. They're so funny. Like to get the Green Day song, I think it was American Idiot. The prompt is pop punk American alternative rock California 2004 Rob Cavallo. Perfect. To get,
And that produced a pastiche of American Idiot?
yes.
Amazing.
To get My Girl by the Temptations, it was My Tempting 1964 Girl, Smokey Sing Hitsville Soul Pop. Got My Girl by the Temptations. This one you'll enjoy, Nilay. To get All I Want for Christmas Is You by Mariah Carey.
My
The
girl.
prompt is Mariah Carey, but with a space between each letter so that it's not, because presumably these
Right,
things
'cause
are
it's
trained
reading
to
for
throw
proper
out
nouns, yeah.
artist
Yeah,
names.
yeah.
So it's M space A space all the way through the name. Contemporary
That's how I
R&B
spell it when I put
holiday,
hearts around
Grammy
her name.
award-winning American singer-songwriter, remarkable vocal range. That produced All I Want for Christmas Is You. I mean, there's a million of
what they're
these.
proving is that it's in the set. By the way, the argument in response that I'm sure we're going to hear, because this is the argument OpenAI made about the Times lawsuit, was one, no human prompts like this. And B, these prompts are so weird, they represent a hack of our system, which is remarkable. But I'm confident, based on how OpenAI replied to the Times, that is what these companies will reply
There
to.
is one very good one that the prompt was create a song by an artist that rhymes with Truce String Bean that produced a Bruce Springsteen song.
That's very good.
It's fantastic.
So that question I asked Charlie about if you have the entire history of rock and roll, do you need the first song, right? Or do you need Chuck Berry? Okay, maybe
Yes,
you
you
don't, maybe you do, right? Like, I think this third example is the funniest example because I can't figure how you would get to this without specifically one thing. Go ahead, David.
I'm glad you agree because I left this for last for precisely this reason. So here is, I won't even spoil it. Here's the real one.
Jason Derulo.
Yeah, okay, right? Everybody's heard it a million times. That's our boy. That's our boy JD.
The longest lasting digital career that I never expected to happen.
I know. And here is the AI. I just want to say this was created by a prompt on Udio. This is in theory a completely synthetic new work of art.
Jason Derulo.
Oh, it's so good.
It does sound like a Jason Derulo song. Like my critique of
Yes.
does this sound like real music aside?
It's even got the little like vocal riff at the end. Like it's
Like,
right
does
on
Jason
point.
Derulo sound like synthetic music? That's your problem.
This one's interesting though because Nilay, you've talked a lot about the issue that likeness is not copyrightable, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a question of like if we're going back to this hypothetical, there is no suit that's suing over this particular Jason Derulo riff. Someone I could say Jason Derulo on a song probably, and you can't copyright that.
So hold on.
Oh.
This is weird. So
Didn't
these
we have this fight
tags-
the last time with the Metro Boomin
Yes.
tag?
with a Metro Boomin song. So Metro Boomin's producer tag was the copyrightable expression in the fake Drake song.
If it's exactly the recording of
Yeah.
the tag though, right? Because the issue was that they actually kept in the sample of the producer
Right.
tag and reproducing a recording, you can copyright that.
So we could start every episode of the Vergecast with Nilay singing Jason Derulo.
And
get away
And we
with it.
will.
I think you probably would have a lot of issues, a lot of nasty letters
I'm
written
saying
to you.
in terms of ways to boost this podcast profile after 13 years, Jason Derulo suing us is high on my list.
That's
would work.
wonderful. But
I'm
this
into it.
definitely proves that like you had to have had access. There is no monkeys in the back writing Shakespeare that ends up on Jason Derulo. It just doesn't happen. It's not possible.
Actually, I don't know. I think if you took the worst impulses of the music industry and fed them into an AI, you might produce Jason Derulo.
This one's also important though because everything else we've heard has been written by artists pre-Copyright Act of 1974, and probably also reflects some of maybe who the lawyers are writing these these cases because we're talking about the cases reference Frank Sinatra, right? And to bring in Bruce Springsteen. Actually,
Right. It's
that's
like Bruce
1974.
Springsteen, Mariah Carey, Green Day, Chuck Berry.
The early ones are all Chuck Berry, like The Temptations.
Right. Are you getting
Frank
it like the judges are
Sinatra.
old?
I'm saying everyone, yeah. And that's actually
Right.
potentially very advantageous in knowing the judge and who you might go in front of. But then to show that also they're taking all the latest music as well. Like we're bringing in Jason Derulo, yes.
Like, Judge, have you heard, Your Honor, are you familiar with Jason Derulo?
I want to bring Jason Derulo into the courtroom. Jason Derulo.
By the way, another total side note, there's an incredible Katie Nautopoulos piece about hardcore Jason Derulo stans and what their stan culture is like that I will dig up and put in the show
Oh
notes.
my gosh, that
It
sounds
is
fun.
truly one of the funniest things I've ever read on the internet. Just because A, it exists, and B, because Katie is good at finding things like that exist.
Have you all tried running these prompts, by the way?
No, have you?
Yeah, you can go to Udio and to Suno and you can run the prompts that these lawsuits are alleging, and you don't get the same songs, obviously, but like if you write make a jazz crooner song about New York, baritone voice, you will definitely get it's Frank Sinatra. There's no other song but Frank. And I don't think that really is hacking the systems. It's really easy. The other thing I get a lot, by the way, are random prompt. Hey, that sounds strangely like Crazy Town by Butterfly. And my prompt was actually, I tried to make a rap about American
rap.
founder Thomas
Butterfly
Jefferson.
by Crazy Town.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, thank you. Butterfly by Crazy
If there was a band called Butterfly that had a song called Crazy Town, that would be perfect.
in another universe. So
On Udio, I'm sure there is.
I did try to hack these systems a little bit, and I wrote, I want you to write a rap about American founder Thomas Jefferson about not throwing away his shot. Nasal male rapper, boom bap. And what I got was basically Butterfly by Crazy Town. So,
Just like total random.
yeah.
With enhanced, carving out the
Oh, no.
revolution. Tom Jeff never slept, crafting constitution. Slave owner by day, freedom writer by night. Hypocrisy thick, but the pen game tight.
Oh, God.
Visionary eyes, dreams like fireworks. Built a nation, but the roots got quirks. Creeks run red, history be relentless. But TJ's legacy straight up contentious. Monticello
That's I'm sorry. I'm just sorry for listening to this, and we suggest you that.
That really is Butterfly by Crazy Town.
I think it's also a little bit of what was that song, Superman?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Who's Superman
man.
by?
I'll be your kryptonite or whatever. That was a horrible song.
Kryptonite. Yeah, Kryptonite. 3 Doors Down. Is that who it's
Three
by?
Doors Down. It is by Three Doors Down.
It's got a little bit of that. It's just, you can so easily hear references that are not even the thing that you prompt. And I have to say that if you go to the homepage of Udio, the 2 most popular tracks are exact sound-alikes of Eminem and Snoop Dogg. So people are doing this. Like, people are trying to make sound-alikes.
So the argument from all these companies is, look, training is fair use. And that's the argument for OpenAI. That's the argument for Google. It's the argument for Suno and Udio. The organization of these cases is different because the plaintiffs are different, right? The New York Times is situated differently than the major labels. People have different emotional relationships with different kinds of work. But this is the argument. Like when Google eventually goes and sues OpenAI for training on YouTube, the weirdness of that argument is Google telling OpenAI that training on YouTube is not fair. Like that's what's going to happen here. It's all the same argument. And it's all kind of in a circle.
Wait, so Google can do it and it's fair use, but Suno and Udio cannot do it because it's not fair use.
This is the trap the industry has set for itself.
And our giant
what's that line?
consolidated.
Yeah, right. It's all the same VCs and all in all different directions.
Kind of like the music business.
That's true. There's that line though. It's like you have to be perfect every time, and I just have to get through once. Yeah, it's like I can't. I don't remember exactly what it is. That's what
Well, it's like the hacker creed, right? Like you have to stop me every time. All I have to do is I just have to get through once.
Yeah. And that feels like the copyright situation for AI right now. This is a house of cards, and maybe the Times will win. Maybe the record labels will win. Maybe Sarah Silverman will win. Like there are so many of these. Maybe Google and OpenAI reach an agreement about training on YouTube, and then a bunch of YouTube creators sue, and maybe they win. Like you can just game it out 100 different ways. At some point, someone is going to win a lawsuit that says training is not fair use.
Yeah. The fair use argument here, I feel like is notable. I feel like is quite different than what the New York Times can claim, because part of fair use is, for example, the effect on the potential market, right? And with New York Times, they're going to have to argue, well, you're using our articles and other people are taking that and creating text and putting it on other pseudo-journalistic sites, right?
I'm pretty sure the Times is suing for both the output and the training.
I see. Okay.
So I think these cases are all different. This is what I mean. Like the strategy for one doesn't work for all of them in the same way.
Right. In the case of music, the marketplace argument, like is it going to affect the marketplace? I think they have a very strong argument here. I think the RIAA has a very strong argument. They're basically saying, Suno and Udio, you are charging users money to make songs that you are allowing them to upload to the exact same place where we also have all of our songs, to Spotify, Apple Music, etc. And so you are actually changing the marketplace for music, having used all of this output. But is that not part of the argument you're saying?
I think we have to find out how that shakes out.
Right.
Like I don't know. They got to get assigned a judge, right? Like right now what they've done is they put out a complaint in a press release. There hasn't been a reply to that complaint or an answer. They haven't been assigned a judge. Like they haven't done any discovery. Like, we just don't know a bunch of stuff. And we certainly don't know where they're going to put their focus. But that part where copyright law is just about making copies, and in the history of computing, every single copy has been litigated down to, again, I think I bring it up every time. MAI versus Peak Systems. You go look it up. This is, are you, a third-party software seller, allowed to load software into a computer's memory without permission? Crazy. A crazy court case. Yeah. Can you put a disk in a computer and load software from the disk to the hard drive without my permission? Got litigated. And they lost. Crazy. They lost. And then we had to get all the way through caching. Our ephemeral copies on your ISP's network equipment, or those copies that should be litigated. This is copyright law. It's dumb. Like it is a very dumb rationale, but it litigates the creation of copies. So here it's, did you have permission to make a copy to train your model of all these songs? And every time you didn't have permission, by the way, we want the statutory maximum of $150,000.
Which essentially ends up being a pretend amount of money.
It's got to be bigger than the US GDP.
Yeah, it's like crazy, right? Like, did you have permission to copy every song in the world? And if you didn't, every song in the world times $150,000 is what we're asking for.
I'm going to run this.
If you didn't have that permission, can we do an analysis that says that use is fair use? Right? So fair use is what's called an affirmative defense to copyright infringement, where you admit it. You're like, I did it, but under this other rationale, that's fine. And so that's like the winding path here is, well, first, they won't even cop to having made the copies, which is why the music industry is putting out, well, here's just Johnny B. Good. Like, you can't output Johnny B. Good unless you copy Johnny B. Good on the front end, right? Okay, so first we got to get them to cop to making the copies at all, which they claim is proprietary business information. Sure. Then it's, was that copy allowed. They obviously didn't have permission. This is why they're in a lawsuit. And then it's, is it fair use? And then we run the analysis. And the analysis is like the purpose and character of the use, the amount of the use, the nature of the use, and then the last factor is the effect on the market.
Right.
On the output side, I think the market argument is really strong.
Right. So the question is, does this case, this is something I actually don't understand. Maybe you can explain with your copyright law degree. Is there like some wall between the input and the output in this argument that says, well, there's no marketplace.
You know that emoji
for
that's like this with the hands?
Yeah.
It's the hands are up. Like I'm just that emoji right now. I don't know.
Because I was trying to say, oh, well, if there's a clear change in the marketplace for songs, which are all outputs. But it sounds like, we don't know what the responses are going to be. But they could say, well, there isn't currently a marketplace for training data in this kind of way. And so it's not affecting that marketplace.
But there will never be a market if you just set the rate at 0. Right. So if you're like, I want really high quality music for my high quality music AI program, I'm going to go pay a bunch of artists. But then these guys come along and steal it. Like you've actually preemptively destroyed the market. You've never allowed that market to set some rates. And I've heard from publishers who are taking the deals with OpenAI. Disclosure, Vox Media has a content licensing deal with OpenAI. I've heard from other publishers, not our company, that one of the reasons they've taken these deals is to create that market. Right. So that the Times can go to court and say, this has an effect on the market. Look at this market. Look at the money that's moving around. And so some of these publishers are playing kind of a strategic game to say, we should create a market to help that factor along. I think that's fascinating. But I don't think that the AI company, I think they thought they could just buy forgiveness. And what's crazy to me is when it was Napster or YouTube or Google search even, buying forgiveness worked because people liked the companies. They liked the products. They liked the experiences they were having. And here, people, I mean, if you're listening to this and you have a very different view of this, let me know. But our audience is pretty loud with us that they don't like these companies. And they perceive this as a moral problem. And I think that's just a very different position for them all to be in.
Which brings us to your moral quandary. Seems like you flipped sides from 20 years ago.
Yeah, the idea that I'm sitting here being like the RIAA has a point is crazy. Like it's bananas. And Sarah Zhang and I have been like all day, every day, like slacking. Like, who have we become? This is like the horseshoe theory of copyright law politics. It's weird, man. And I think one of the pieces of the puzzle, and I'm curious how you see this in the music industry itself, Charlie. One of the pieces of the puzzle here is that the internet just blew the bottom out of the music industry. Like there's no way to be like a middle class musician anymore. There's no guaranteed way to make money. You're playing the same algorithmic game as everyone else. You're beholden to some labels. You don't have any power as an individual against these platforms. So now this next group of people who's come and taken your work for free and is going to extract value from you. Well, sure. Like the enemy of my enemy is my friend. It's kind of the vibe. But I'm wondering if you see that reflected in the actual music industry.
Absolutely. I mean, the public perception here is so different than what was happening back in the Napster era. Back in the Napster era, the labels were enemy number one. Selling out to labels was a big, they were the worst players. Today, I actually think they've done a very effective job of using their proxy, Spotify, and let Spotify be the enemy. And everyone's like, Sony Music, who are they? Like Warner, UMG, like they have labeled deal, but they are not. They're not the topic of conversation of who's really screwing who. Now they basically help set the rates of what gets paid out in streaming, and it's the distributors now that really are taking all the heat. And so they're actually in a better, I think, place of public perception in terms of within the music industry. I see songwriters, producers, fans totally freaked out about what's going on. When you go and scan through a lot of the YouTube comments of some of these AI songs, the sentiment is, we are screwed. Music is over. I give up. I am not learning an instrument. Like it is not. The future is bright. We're going to create new, beautiful music. Like my creativity is going to blossom. I think that there is a real existential fear that exists within all of the AI world. But you're getting into like our human emotions and the beautiful creative output. Hopefully beautiful. I mean, listen, how you feel about pop music, whatever. Don't bring Jason into this.
We got to get Derulo on the pod. I don't know.
Really do.
That's obviously like reading through the RIAA's lawsuit. Like that is, they talk about the creativity and human emotion of it all. But is the end of this just they're trying to get checks in the same way that there are a lot of folks out there just trying to get checks. Like, well, because part of me, like, I think obviously that's the answer, but also part of me wonders if the labels are feeling the same way that you do, which is that, oh, this is not just a thing we need to make money off of tomorrow. This is like an existential crisis for our business down the road. Or if they're like, whatever, this is just a new turn, we have to make sure we get paid.
This is an existential crisis because they are already losing market share to people who are not on major labels. Major label listening is down, right? As an overall share of all listening, it's still a lot of it, still the majority of listening. But so they recognize that flooding the streamers with more and more independent music has not necessarily been good for their business. And with more flooding, it's just going to bring everything down to everything is valueless entirely. If you own music and it gets played a lot on streaming, there's a lot of money in it. Like there's billions and billions and billions of dollars in streaming. How it's distributed is not always fair, and people get upset about this. But they very much need to figure out how to enter and participate in this marketplace. And I think kind of like a content ID system, they want to figure out how to properly license. You want to use Jason Derulo's voice? Jason Derulo says yes, and it costs this. And now we've got Jason Derulo copies, and that's okay.
By the way, of all of the artists who would let his voice get deepfaked to make like commercials,
Jason Derulo.
It's Jason Derulo. And look, I'm not even saying I've talked a lot of Jason Derulo related-ish on this episode. I'm aware of it. I just know that he is a commercial mastermind.
Yes.
Like that man's going to make a bag no matter what happens.
Yes.
Friend of the pod, Blake Reed, he's a professor at Colorado Law, teaches copyright, telecom, all this stuff. He wrote me a note last week or the week before, and he said something really smart that I've been thinking about. And it's related to what you're saying, David. Copyright law is like an economic system. Right. We create scarcity and then we can like charge money for things because you're not allowed to just like freely copy them. So if you do something bad in the world of copyright law, the answer is you pay money and you fix it and you even out the economic problem that you've created. Right. Olivia Rodrigo might have sung 4 notes of a Taylor Swift song. The answer is Taylor Swift gets a writing credit and then some money flows to Taylor Swift. And that is the end of that story. Right. And it's just an economic problem that you've solved by redistributing money. Mm-hmm. AI is a moral problem. This is the thing Blake pointed out to me. Is like the money doesn't solve the perceived moral issue here. So the labels might get paid. They might find some business model that lets them license the music into perpetuity or whatever. But the thing you're seeing in the YouTube comments, the thing our audience is feeling, the thing I think a lot of artists are feeling, does not get solved by money. Right? It's like another problem. And so like you see these deals come up and get signed and whatever, and everyone's like, it's still pretty icky. Right. And there's something there that I think is important. I haven't quite puzzled it out. I actually want to do something with that idea. If you have further thoughts, let me know what you think about it. But that gap is the gap. Right. We can move a bunch of money around. Like the VCs in Hollywood and the Recording Industry Association of America, God bless them. They will move the money around. Lucian Grange will get paid. Is that going to solve the other problem? Right. And I think that's really hard.
Well, there's 2 things that musicians need to not fear. One is that because the output of all of these models cannot be copywritten, this music is kind of in this weird limbo space. Like maybe it's going to it will definitely find some streams, but it probably won't be synced on television and film because no TV producer is going to want to have a song where they like don't really understand the rights associated with that song. And if they have the right to it, and does it also secretly contain a vocal sample of James Brown that has been stolen. Like, so nobody wants to, any rights holder doesn't want to use this music that can't be used in a weird way. So I think composers and people who are putting stuff on TV and film, I think that there's still very much a business for them until these much bigger legal issues get sorted out. The other place is that music is about human connection. And I don't say this in some like wishy-washy way. It's like, there is no fandom for Olivia Rodrigo without an Olivia Rodrigo. Like you need the person. The time that the music industry tried to create like an avatar, racially strangely coded, what was that guy's name? It was terrible. They tried to do like their NFT avatar pop star, and it was an utter failure, both because it was completely racist and because why would we develop a relationship to this thing? And so the fandom side, the pop stardom side of pop music, I don't think is ever going to go away.
What about Hatsune Miku? Right, she's like the cartoon character. I just learned that she's officially codenamed CV01.
Yeah, there are these avatar characters that are finding some fandoms online. Yes, that's gonna happen. I still just like that's not Olivia. That's not Taylor. That's not Gaga. I'm sorry. That's just different.
All right, we got to end it. They're not Jason Derulo.
They're not Jason Derulo.
Like the bar is like, can your cartoon character defeat Jason Derulo? I'll take it. That's a good place to end it. Charlie, thank you so much for joining the show. I suspect you're going to be back on the show quite a bit as these cases wind their way through the courts.
Anytime.
All right, we got to take a break. We'll be right back. All right, we're back. That's enough Jason Derulo for one episode of the Vergecast.
Can I tell you a Jason Derulo story?
Yes, of course.
So I would say the single most ethically compromised thing I've ever done was say yes to some company that I can't even remember that had like a 200-person Jason Derulo concert in San Francisco. This is when I had like not been dating the woman who is now my wife for very long. And my
oh my
like,
god! If
cool
you pulled Anna
tech journalist move was
a
to
Jason
take Anna
Derulo
to
show?
a Jason Derulo concert, and it worked. It worked. He had his shirt off the whole time. It was spectacular.
I hope you tell Arthur when he's older that he exists because of Jason Derulo. That's a lot. Yeah, you would have been fading away like that picture in Back to the Future if not for the power of Jason
Every time
Derulo.
AI copies it, Arthur gets a little bit less solid.
All right, we got to do a lightning round. There's a lot of gadget news. There's basically 2 gadget lightning rounds.
Yeah.
Let's start. 3 phone events announced in quick succession here. So Samsung announced Unpacked. That's looking like July 10th.
Yeah,
we're
like 2
expecting
weeks.
some foldables. Surprise Pixel 9 announcement from Google in August. And then Motorola just had an event and announced the 2024 Razrs. So
Motorola knows it doesn't get to announce an event. It just has to tell you what phones they're at.
Well, it had like a big influencer. Like, I don't think we went because we already had the phones. But like it had like a big influencer launch event with some of the funniest photos of like very cool influencers looking extremely bored with like very colorful Razr phones. We can get to that in a minute.
Sounds right.
But this is pretty early in the cycle for a bunch of phone launches.
It is weird. I've been trying to figure out what's going on, and it's very clear that the AI race is now happening to everybody else, where I think the thing that is happening is everybody is just announcing like the same set of 12 features and the same new hardware that does the same new stuff. Like Apple is copying Google, is copying Samsung, is copying Apple. And so now there's this incredible race to just be the first one to say it out loud. And I think especially on Android, there's just going to be so much like AI sameness over the next 12 months as they all rush to do everything they can think of. So the goal, I think especially, is to beat Apple. Like, to me, this Google thing is so transparently just doing this sooner in order to say all the words out loud about what your camera can do before Apple says those same words out loud about what its camera can do.
Yeah. So what's interesting, let's start with Google. What's fascinating to me about Google is they just shook up those teams. Mm-hmm. So Rick Osterloh, who had all of hardware, now has all of it, including Android. That's a complicated switch up, right? So like the Pixel team, their boss now runs Android, or their old boss now runs Android. They got a new boss. And the big question for Google this whole time has been, are you going to try? Are you going to try hard? And like the thing that has kept them from trying hard is they have to maintain the Android ecosystem. In the United States, that's mostly expressed to Samsung. Like you just got to keep Samsung happy. Around the world, there are many more players, and Android is expressed very differently. But if like the Pixel guy, like Rick, is like, I'm doing it with the Pixel, and that's his first move as the boss of Android, weird. Just weird. I think that's weird. It's like that shakeup is weird. And then on top of that, I think Google really wants AI to be the differentiator for Pixel.
Oh, yeah.
Right? That big vertically integrated, like only Google can do all this stuff at every layer of the stack. We build our own chips, like like all the way. You want to do that with Pixel so you can body up against the phone. So a really just weird spot for Google to be in.
It is. And it feels like Google is trying to do the same thing to both Samsung and Apple, but can only say that it's trying to do it to Apple, which is basically like, I think Google very clearly, and they've kind of said this out loud, sees this as its chance to win in hardware, right? That like if they can be the ones to make AI happen and do it well and do it first and do it in the biggest, most interesting, most differentiated ways, that all of a sudden this is the best new reason to buy a phone that we've had in a really long time.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true. I don't know that there's a ton of evidence yet that it is true, but if it's true, and if you believe it's true, everything Google has done sort of makes sense, right?
I will remind you that my response to all AI announcements right now are it's probably broken, I don't believe you, including Apple. I want to be very clear about this. Apple has not announced a date for anything yet, for any of the Apple Intelligence features, and no one has ever seen those features in anything but a totally controlled demo.
Yeah. There's
So-
an increasingly angry rant inside of me about how AI is actually nothing and we all need to stop it. But I'm waiting a while for that to come out.
I mean, look, we can get a computer to produce a pitch perfect Jason Derulo tech. All right. It's something. I'm not sure what it is, but it's something.
It is something. I'll give you that.
So I just think that one for Google, how they talk about the Pixel, in relation to Google's AI capabilities,
Yep.
how much of those AI capabilities come to Android versus just the Pixel. There is some kind of shakeup going on over there, and I'm kind of curious how they handle it, especially if they can ship the stuff before Apple.
Yes. Yeah. If they do this and they're like, oh, shipping in October, that's a unbelievable whiff.
Yes.
But if they can do it, and I think especially
Well, no,
if-
because Apple's going to announce new iPhones, and it's not going to have Apple Intelligence until like next year. So even if Google's like shipping in January, they're going to get to market with an AI phone before Apple.
Probably, yeah. But I don't know that anybody is sitting around waiting for an AI phone, right? Like, I think
fair enough.
we're still at this point, and this is part of what I'm really excited about, is I think there are two simultaneous things happening here where we're going to see in rapid succession, I think Samsung and Google both try really hard to make the case for foldables. Like, it's very clear that Samsung is all in on that train. I think one of the things Google is probably going to do is push the new Pixel Fold or whatever it's going to be called. I've heard rumors it's going to be called the Pixel 9 XL Fold, which sucks.
Course. Perfect.
Just call it the Pixel Fold 2, everybody. It'll be fine. But anyway, they're going to try to make this case for this like new kind of phone. I think especially as we get to AI, like you can start to see what you do with the extra screen, what you do with the extra power, all this different stuff. Again, in the hopes that Apple is just going to announce like a samey iPhone that does samey iPhone things and looks less interesting compared to the Android stuff. I don't know if it'll work, but I think that is the gambit, and I think it's going to be really interesting. But then at the same time, everybody is trying to make these AI cases, and no one has those yet. I don't think. Like and even throw Motorola into that, right? There's this question about like, what is the form factor? And it's going to be like the summer of foldables and flippables and whatever else. And then at the end of it, we'll have Apple. And whether anyone can do anything that is better than last year's iPhone feels extremely up in the air still, which is kind of wild.
Let's talk about the Motorola phone for a second. The Razr Plus actually looks great
It does.
because they put a 4-inch screen on the front, which is the size of the original iPhone. Like it's bigger than the original iPhone, I think. Yeah. It's just a full phone.
Yeah, you
on the
just have
front
two
of the
phones now instead of one phone.
It's
Well, I
very
don't see what the
good.
problem is.
And they went with saturated colors. Like honestly, this is the thing I like about this phone the most. The colors are hot.
Yeah, they really are.
But they've refined this design, right? This is like the third one of these, the fourth one of these. It's expensive. It's $1,000. But I'm looking at it and I'm like, you know what? If AI can actually do any of the things people say it can do, which I don't believe, and I believe that it's mostly broken, actually maybe this is the time to get a smaller phone. Right, if I could just talk to the phone and have it do a bunch of stuff for me, like I don't need all this screen. I'm not looking for another laptop, which is basically where my phone is going right now. It's like very quickly becoming another laptop.
I got so much shit last year for writing that everybody should start making flip phones, and history will prove me right. I firmly believe it.
Motorola doesn't have any of the AI features, and they swapped out the ultra wide for a telephoto, which is just the wrong approach. Like everyone loves these ultra wides and whatever. But these phones look great. And then on top of it, you know, Apple's supporting RCS now. So the iMessage stickiness, like I'm like, maybe I could just like try one of these for a while and like not everyone will be mad at me once everyone upgrades to iOS 18. Like there's something there that is super interesting. But it's not because of the AI. It's because of the form factor and honestly the colors. Like I just like things that look different.
The orange Razr is sick. I'm very into it.
But then you look at Samsung. Samsung is basically just like moving down the line, right? It's like we're going to get a new Z Flip and a new Z Fold. And like Bixby will be marginally smarter, but who cares?
Yeah.
And They've got to deal with use some Google stuff, but not all of it. And like lots and lots and lots of questions about how Samsung pulls this off in a way that's differentiated from Google.
Yeah, to me, the big question for Samsung is if it can make the Ring a desirable thing.
We're expecting the Galaxy Ring in the next year.
Like, and we've been hearing sort of bits and pieces about it for a while. It seems to look good. We got to try a prototype a while back. Like, I have reasonably high expectations for this thing. And if it's great or even pretty good, that's a pretty solid ecosystem play for Samsung to make that at least I think might convince some people who have Galaxy phones to keep their Galaxy phones, which is something. But I do agree. I think there's this bet coming from all of these companies that AI is going to sort of throw the industry up in the air again, and everybody has a chance to win it. And to me, I actually think that may be true, but I think this like flippable, foldable, different form factor, change your relationship with your gadget thing might end up being more important. And
Yes.
AI is part of that, right? Like better Siri makes it so that you have to look at your phone less, which makes it so that you use your phone differently.
If AI makes it so that we have smaller phones, that will be good.
Yeah, agree.
I will take that. By the way, Liam is reminding me that the iPhone 1 was 3.5 inches. It's the iPhone 5 that had a 4-inch screen. So they straight up put an iPhone 5 size screen on the front of the Razr.
fantastic.
It's incredible. But if we can get to a place where the phone is more useful because of AI, so now I can carry a smaller, less distracting phone, that would be good. I don't think any of these companies have put those ideas together yet.
No. But they're all going to come out. What's going to happen is they're all going to talk about the camera. This is going to be the summer of AI features in your camera. And they're all going to be the same features on the same kinds of devices across every single surface you can possibly think of. And I'm already sort of bored of it.
Yeah, here's what I can tell you. I was out with some teens at, like family graduation party. They all had little crappy $100 point and shoots. And then I'm out with the parents, running around Max's kindergarten graduation, and they're all asking me about my RX 100 because everyone kind of thinks iPhone photos look like crap. And as AI kind of creeps in and everything gets brighter and weirder, it's weird to see where people are going instead. And I suspect as soon as Samsung's like more saturation, like I think it's gonna be weird. I think the AI photo trend is gonna. I think people have more taste than these companies are assuming.
I think that's right.
All right, let's run through just some other gadget stuff. We should talk about Rabbit really quickly. This company is a disaster. What's going on with Rabbit?
Do we have to? So I'm just this podcast is just me doing a victory lap. I said a while back that I think that like if you made me forecast whether Humane or Rabbit was closer to being kind of on a right path to do good things, I would say Humane. I was right. Rabbit just continues to be a massive disaster. Basically what happened here is a group of developers and security researchers, I think they called themselves Rabbitude, which is very good, found hard-coded API keys that basically, long story short, like governed Rabbit's access to, I think it was 11 labs who did all their text-to-speech stuff. And by having those API keys are supposed to rotate all the time so that someone else can't get them and use them to get access to that same data. Rabbit wasn't doing that. And so the researchers were able to just use that API key to get into and apparently see every response ever given by a Rabbit device, which is absurd. and has had the Rabbitude apparently said they've had access to these keys for, I think it was more than a month. And Rabbit hadn't done anything, hadn't changed the keys to make them outdated. Just, it's basically like handing somebody your password and saying, here, go nuts, do whatever you want. And it's like, well, are you going to change your password? And you're like, nah, I'm cool.
That company is, ever since your review and then sort of response, it's like you're just waiting. You're just waiting for the next shoe to drop that like there never was a large action model and there never will be. Like it's like too hard to make.
Yeah.
On the Humane side, at least, they're trying to like sell it to HP.
Well, and they've shipped a bunch of updates. It has gotten noticeably better. It's still not good and you still shouldn't buy it, but it is a better product than it was. But I think the Rabbit thing has been so interesting to me these last few months because there is like this running is Rabbit a scam thing happening? And I think it all amounts to basically like they did NFTs, ... How feel about that? However you want. And really, I think, what is the old saying, like, never ascribe to malice what can be described by incompetence? This is just gross incompetence all the way down.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's just brutal to watch. And I wanted this thing to be cool. I wanted this company to work. I was pro the idea of this goofy little orange handheld gadget, and this thing just sucks. Like mine is in a drawer and I don't intend on ever touching it again.
That's basically how everyone I know who bought a rabbit feels about it. Like that cool rabbit animation was worth $300.
Yeah, I'm betting that in 10 years it'll be like a fun story to have on the table behind me while we Vergecast, but until then, I let its battery die, and that is the correct way for it to be.
You're like, I finally a teenage engineering product that costs less than $4,000. I bought it and I have it, and we're good. I want to call this one out. Sean Alster got to sit in the Sony Afeela car where they made with Honda, and then he played Gran Turismo on the screens inside as the car, which is perfect in its way.
Which still seems to be the realest version of this car that exists.
Right, like he's like, here's some stuff I
Turismo.
learned about the car, and he's like, the car isn't real. It's mostly a fake car. And there's no guarantee that it will actually have a PS5 in it. But Sony's trying to make a car, and God bless them. I hope it has ULT power sound in it. Speaking of ULT power sound, I think legally now required to call out party speakers. So Ultimate Ears announced a whole new lineup, including a new Mega Boom and a Wonder Boom.
Yep.
And they now have a feature called Megaphone where you can just hold up your phone, talk in your phone, and broadcast sound to people, which is incredible. I also, on the party speaker update, Ludacris was supposed to play a show in Milwaukee recently, and got called out because of the heat. So he just paired 2 JBL party speakers, wore them with shoulder straps, and did a free concert in a mall.
No way.
Was singing into a microphone. I've yet to confirm whether he used a proprietary protocol to pair the speakers or one of the new open protocols like Auracast, which is very cool. But just know there's video of Ludacris wearing a party speaker with a shoulder strap.
It's amazing. You do it for the people.
Rapping in the mall, which is great. I proposed that we write about it to our team, and they're like, Neil, you can. That's more or less the response.
But that's what we're here for. I love this.
And then real quickly, David, people can go listen to it, but you spent some time on Tuesday talking about Surface laptops, Windows on ARM. What's the vibe?
They seem to be very good. There's like a surprising amount of positivity and enthusiasm that Microsoft actually like pulled this thing off. Tom published his review of the Surface laptop when we talked on Tuesday. He was like mid draft of the review. Published it. He called it Microsoft's best MacBook Air competitor yet, which I suspect if you're Microsoft and knowing everything that we know about how they have talked about these things is exactly what you would hope for.
Yeah.
It still seems like Microsoft like almost finished the job. There's still some like wonky emulation stuff. If you run an emulated app, it seems like it just decimates your battery. Like if anything, Tom was talking about this on Tuesday, but if anything, like understated the extent to which running an app that is not prepared for emulation will just set your computer on fire and kill your battery. But like he got good battery life. One of his pros in the review says 16 gigs of RAM for the base model, which I take as a personal attack, but we'll leave that aside. But it seems like this new line of laptops is going to be really good. Microsoft stuff is coming out. Dell stuff is coming out. Asus reviews are coming out. Like the general vibe around this generation of PCs seems to be pretty good.
Yeah. I think that how good Prism, the emulator, how good Prism is over time is going to be the thing in a way that Rosetta is not the thing on the Mac. Rosetta is the emulator that lets old like Intel apps run on the new ARM chips on a Mac. And like Rosetta was like so good, no one even thought about it. And now it's not even pre-installed on these machines.
Right.
Like if you open an x86 app on a Mac, it asks you if you want to download Rosetta. Whereas I think Prism on the Windows side, you're in it. Like you have a
it's going to be
relationship with
way
Prism
more
now.
important for much longer.
And it doesn't seem to be as good. So I think that's the thing I'm keeping an eye on.
It's also just a much harder task, right? Like there are like centuries of Windows apps that you have to figure out how to run in a way that on a Mac the Mac doesn't
Bill
have
Gates
quite
has
that
a
same
stone
problem.
tablet with a Win32 app on it. It's true, but it's also, if you want to compete, that's the game, right?
Yeah.
So we'll see. All right, we got to take a break. We'll be back with the true lightning round. We'll be right back. All right, we're back with the lightning round. David has 2 I have 3, but one of them is a
You
joke.
3? Oh my
I picked 3.
But
Oh,
I
you go
bet I know
first.
what your joke is. Wait, can I guess what your joke is? Can we do
What
it
is
first?
it?
Do you want to talk about the new Verizon logo?
I want to talk about the new Verizon logo so much. If you haven't seen a Verizon redesign its logo, it's the same text. It's just Helvetica Verizon or whatever it is. They got rid of the check mark, but now the text is red on a black background, and then the V has like a fire gradient in it. It is nuts. Like nuts. Like all the way around. Like
It just, have you ever
putting
seen
a gradient in a logo is such a strong move because it will never get reproduced correctly. Like every time we do a logo redesign, I'm like, let's do gradients. And everyone's like, no. And Verizon's like, screw it. We're doing gradients. But then doing red on black, I actually think is a great move because every carrier should be like, here's what we are. We are the demon spawn reconstruction of AT&T that the United States government tried to kill and was not able to kill, which is what Verizon is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think leaning into the fact that it's from hell is like good. Like, let's just be who you are.
Now that you point that out, it even like you could argue it is kind of like the glow from hell coming out of the bottom of the V.
That's what I'm saying.
Like that really,
it's the most goth telecom logo
really
I've ever seen in my entire life. And it's like, here's what happened. The United States government tried to kill AT&T, and instead we got 2 zombie AT&Ts. And like, just be from hell. Like, that's good. Like, I'm AT&T, I'm looking for your satanic logo redesign any minute now. By the way, this is true. Verizon is one half of the old Baby Bells, and AT&T is the other half of the old Baby Bells. And you just know they want to merge. Like, you know that their CEOs wake up every morning, and they probably look out across the golf course at each other, and they're like, one day, buddy, AT&T's coming back.
this logo
Liberate
sucks.
tutume ex in Ferris.
Once again, I would like to offer my services as the person who will walk into your boardroom, say that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard in my life, and leave for $50,000. And I would have done that for this because they took like this just reminds me of The Gap when they're like, oh, we have this great logo that everybody really likes and doesn't feel dated at all. What if we change it to something so stupid? That'd be so fun, right? And then
By the
they
way,
did
no
it.
one feels anything about the Verizon logo. If you have an
I guess that's
emotional
true.
attachment to any version of the Verizon logo over time, let me know. I'm just saying I'm super down with Verizon being like, this one reminds you of literal hell.
The V just makes me think of like, I don't know why this is where my brain goes, but like, you know how Logan Paul has that sports drink that I can never remember, like I think it's Prime or something
Prime.
like that. This is like if a YouTuber with like 1/10 as many subscribers as Logan Paul wanted to make a sports drink. This is what the V would look like to me.
Yes.
That's all I get is like knockoff sports drink.
That was mine. What's yours?
My first one is some Fediverse news because we are obligated to talk about it.
Yes.
Some new stuff on Threads where now if you have federated your account and you post on Threads, not only can people on other ActivityPub platforms see your post, they can actually like and reply, and you will see the likes and replies. Like the way it's worked in Threads has been kind of weird before, and now there's at least sort of one step of two-way stuff. If you reply to their reply, it gets wacky. But again, like any inkling that Meta is continuing to push into actually opening this stuff up, I find very exciting, and it seems to still be happening that Meta cares about this and wants to federate and make all of this stuff interoperate, and I just think that's very cool.
Whether Meta as a company cares, weird. Like Meta has just weird ideas about all of its platforms right now. They had a half a controversy scandal this week where they just keep limiting the political content. Even if you ask it to show you politics content, it just reverts.
Every time you close the app, it turns the setting off to show you political content.
It's like, yeah, we know you guys don't want news. It's like, it's weird how all of your bugs are in support of you not wanting to show news. The thing that you keep denying. So Meta, the company, is weird. The people who are working on this at Meta, super sincere about it.
Yeah.
Like they are communicating about it. They're posting long threads about it. They've talked to us about it. So at least on that front, the energy of that company is sincerely pointed at, can you make Fediverse work?
Yeah.
And I think that alone is bringing a bunch of other companies along. So like Ghost, the newsletter platform, very sincere about making Federation work. The blog post that their product manager is writing about figuring out how to do Federation and ActivityPub, some of the funniest technical blog posts you will ever read in your entire life.
It's very good. And this stuff is complicated. It's actually, if you want to like understand what it takes to make all this work, those blog posts are actually pretty good because this stuff is messy.
I mean, we want to do it, and Like, like sending stuff out for a media company is like in our DNA. Like we have RSS, we syndicate to Apple News. Like we have feeds of content going to all these places. Like out is super great.
Right.
All day long. What do media companies love doing? Sending their shit out for free.
Right.
Like, work for free? By all means. Like every media company is like, let's do it. Inbox is really hard, right? The part where I post a quick post to The Verge, it gets federated, you hit like on it, and then it comes back to us. Super hard. And then making that two-way in turn. So you've replied to my post on some Mastodon server, and then I reply to you, and that goes back out to you, and then everyone else can see it. All that's really complicated. And then if you're Meta or any of these other companies, you have to like be legally compliant in Europe and blah, 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 blah. So it's going slow because it's complicated, but you can just see there's movement and there's still a bunch of energy there. It's not like it hasn't broken Twitter yet.
Right.
All that stuff is happening, but I can see how complicated it is, but I can see people are just consistently plugging away at it, which I think is great.
Yeah, I agree. Just the sheer existence of new features on this front goes a long way. And you can see it like in the Fediverse space. Every time Meta announces anything, all of my like Fediverse bros on Mastodon are like, let's go. It's great. I love it. All right, what's your next one?
Big Supreme Court week. SCOTUS has actually not released a bunch of big decisions that we want to cover, some very complicated ones. But they released one big one that I think is really important to talk about just briefly. There was a group of basically COVID deniers who sued the Biden administration for like First Amendment violations because the Biden administration had been talking to social media platforms about vaccine information and misinformation. And they basically said this is impermissible censorship. And they got all the way to the Supreme Court by way of the Fifth Circuit, which is crazy. The Fifth Circuit basically wrote like a fever dream, like... if the fever dreams of YouTube swamp could have written a judicial opinion, like that was the Fifth Circuit opinion. Like I think they called it like the largest coordinated government censorship campaign in history. And it got to the Supreme Court, or 6-3 Supreme Court, full of extremely hard right conservatives. And they basically are like, what are you talking about? That's the opinion written by Amy Coney Barrett. And she says like flat out, like one, you don't have standing to sue here. You cannot prove one set of actions by the government that pulled your post down. Like there's nothing here in this body of evidence that says the government censored you. So like you shouldn't even be here. And then she says this other thing, which I think is really important for this whole debate that probably no one will pay attention to, but very important to this whole debate. She's like, you have collapsed the users of the platform, and the government all into one thing. Like the plaintiffs, the defendants, and you are like, and the platforms in between, it's not just one thing. Like there are some people who got hurt who claim that they got censored this way by this agency talking to that platform. There are people who say that a different part of the Biden administration talked to a different platform which sued yet a third person about something else. And that's not all the same thing. So like the idea that there's a mass coordinated government censorship campaign directed at platforms broadly that is directed at that doesn't make any sense.
Well, that is sort of an animating argument of a corner of the internet. And it was nice to see that kind of roundly refuted.
Basically, she was like, this is nonsense.
Yeah.
And like this Supreme Court telling that swamp, like this is nonsense is pretty notable to me. That's not to say, look, I think government speech regulations are bad. I think everybody knows how I feel about the First Amendment. That's not to say there isn't overreach and weird jawboning. That's what it's called when the government sort of like pressures a platform. They call it jawboning. There's a lot of that going on. For example, conservative Republicans basically just got the Stanford Internet Observatory defunded.
Right.
By putting a lot of pressure on Stanford. Is that cool? Is that a thing you want? Is that a speech? Right. There's like a lot of that going on both sides. Like Democrats love a speech regulation, actually, the same way Republicans do. Like all these kids' safety bills are basically speech regulations. Just we think it's important to protect kids, so we can like shove a speech regulation into American political history. Weird all around. I'm not saying I support them. I'm just saying this case was so stupid, and our Supreme Court was like, it's pretty stupid, and kicked him out. All right, what's yours? What's your next one?
My next one is a small one about the ChatGPT Mac app, which is now available to everybody, and I think it's fascinating because a couple of people have pointed out to me very recently that one of the strange things about OpenAI is it's terrible at making product. That it has what a lot of people would argue is like best in class, extremely good technology. And I can't stop talking to people whose whole pitch is we did it better than OpenAI. And I think the Mac app is weirdly important for ChatGPT because OpenAI has been pretty like loudly and clearly working on a search engine. I think they have a lot of other ways they're trying to figure out how to productize this stuff other than just like a weird, ugly chatbot in your web browser. And this thing where it can, talk to you using supporting documents, like you can take screenshots on your computer and upload it and ask questions about it. That's very cool. It has access to different things on your computer. This is like, if you want to see what OpenAI is actually trying to do and get you a normal person to be interested in, like the Mac app is a pretty big step in that direction. And I just think it's really interesting. Also, all of its most interesting Scarlett Johansson-y voices still not there.
Yeah, I think we know
womp.
why. I think Scarlett Johansson was like, no.
She's like, I use Windows. Thank you.
Super gonna sue you very soon.
Yeah.
All right, last one. And this is, I think, the most important thing we're going to talk about this week on the show. As you know, The Verge is America's foremost Cybertruck wiper news source.
That's correct.
We've been very responsible on the show. I think you also know we are very precious, very serious journalists. We take our duty of care very seriously. This is true.
I was there when you first got your hand on a Cybertruck wiper. And it was, and you journalismed a Cybertruck wiper at South by Southwest. It was a big deal.
I don't think the owner of that Cybertruck enjoyed the practice of journalism.
I don't think so either.
I committed some real acts of journalism with that wiper. So a few weeks ago, there was these reports that the Cybertruck wiper was faulty and Cybertruck's deliveries were being held back, that there was potentially a recall, that it was flapping around, that it wasn't very effective. And we held back. Hundreds of tips arrived out of various Cybertruck forums and social media posts, and we couldn't confirm them. So we ran reportedly. We were very calm. Other sites, I won't name names, ran with it. Sensational, outrageous clickbait journalism. They were right.
Clickbait.
They were right the whole time. I want to be clear. They were right the whole time. Now there's an official recall of the Cybertruck wiper, which has motor problems, it's just flapping, and then the trim on the back is flying off the cars, which is
that
great.
seems worse.
It's not good. There's a lot of Cybertruck owners in the forums now who are like, we just got had. Like, this is nonsense. Not great for your $100,000 triangle. It's the second big recall. The first one that you recall, it's the second big recall. The first one, if you remember, was the accelerator pedal was getting stuck.
Yep. Which they fixed with like a rivet, right?
Yeah, and that's how I would fix it.
Sure.
I'd be like, just get some, just rivet it in. Just
point your nail gun at it and see what happens.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The trim is going to be fixed with something called adhesion promoter, which basically like make the glue work better, and pressure sensitive tape, or they will replace it if necessary free of charge, of course. And then the wiper is excessive electrical current can cause the front windshield wiper motor controller to fail. So they will replace the motor.
I'm sure this is not what's happening, but that makes it sound like it's getting like too much power. And it's becoming like electrified and going 1,000 miles an hour, and then it just like launches itself into space, and that's the end of your Cybertruck wiper.
Well, look, I won't draw too many connections here, but you will recall one of the big innovations of the Cybertruck is its new 48-volt control system.
Oh,
whereas
right.
like traditional cars are 12. And the fact that the wiper is a big like, I don't know if that's the case. I don't know if these things are connected. Whatever. But the fact
turn
that
on your wiper, your battery just instantly dies.
it's not great. The fact that it's the wiper motor is like, they did not need to reinvent this wiper, and they super did. And there are lots of videos of it just flopping. Like if it's raining really hard, like its structural integrity fails. Again, America's number one Cybertruck news source. We're trying to be very responsible here. I'm just saying we probably could have gone with the intense clickbait when people started reporting this the first time. And we held back, but it turns out it's actually broken and there is a recall. It's very funny. God bless Tesla for launching this angry triangle of a car. It's very good. By the way, at the same time all this is happening with Tesla, Rivian just announced like a $5 billion joint venture with Volkswagen and put like 5 mystery cars in its roadmap. The competition is here. Like they better fix these wipers is all I'm saying.
And
keep
Rivian
them-
in particular feels like it immediately went from like cool company, interesting ideas, can it survive, to like, oh, it's coming now. And even the way that like RJ, their CEO, talked about it afterwards was like, it's like, buckle up, like, let's go.
Yeah. He's
It's
like, I
time.
got some money. I've got a manufacturing partner who can like scale really fast. And then Volkswagen gets a bunch of their software, which they're very excited about because they just re-architected the whole thing. RJ is going to be on Decoder in a few weeks.
Oh, nice.
So I'm very excited to ask him exactly when I can get an R3X, which is basically what we're going to talk about the whole time. Can I have it now? It's been 45 minutes. Can I have it now? That's how we're going to go through it.
I like that.
All right. We got to get out of here. We're way over. Thank you to Charlie for being on the show. It's always great to talk to him. I got to call it. The Verge store is back. We got new gear. We also have big mugs, 14 ounce.
It's very exciting.
Coffee
I'm
mugs. They're not
hoping
as big
this
as
is
they
the
need.
last time I will ever have this stupid tiny mug on the Vergecast. From now on, bigger and bigger mugs every 12 months or so, until eventually we have like an Ajit Pi 60-inch mug. I'm very excited about it.
And I should call it. It is the 4th of July. So happy 4th. We're off next week.
Yeah.
Take a break. Light some fireworks. Drink a beer. It's going to be great.
Keep all your fingers. Be careful.
That's it. That's the Vergecast. Rock and roll.
And that's it for the Vergecast this week. Hey, we'd love to hear from you. Give us a call at 866-VERGE11. The Vergecast is a production of the Verge and Vox Media Podcast Network. Our show is produced by Andrew Marino and Liam James. That's it. We'll see you next week.